carry out tasks as assigned to us. Yes, I'm formally associated with two ministries, and I'm a member of a team which is also a government function, and I also do a little bit of work for the party.
Well, I think each one of us should be thankful that he found time to be here, given the fact that elections are happening in 5 major states, and then of course everybody is in the mode of 2024 elections. But thank you very much, Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri. But before we begin this round of deliberations on which way India is going, I would like to call upon Ambassador retired Atul to, just for our audience, set the perspective of what we really are looking at in terms of policy formation, in terms of the direction that India needs to take at this moment, given the fact that there are global challenges which only keep getting more and more complicated as the weeks and months go by.
Navika Ji, thank you very much, and it's always an honor to appear on such a distinguished panel, particularly with dear friend and colleague, Minister Hardeep Singh Puri. Purple must be the color of the day for foreign service officers. I promise we didn't coordinate, but
I thought you were taking your cue from all the fashionistas and the fashion designers, because they have declared purple as the color of the season. So big round of applause. They're with the times, with the colors of the season, both Atul and Minister Hardeep Singh Puri.
Just in order, I don't want to interrupt you, Ambassador, but just in order to set the record straight, my color scheming comes from a higher authority, and I am told every Thursday that this is the color. If you had this event yesterday, it would have been green. I think you have access to my higher authority as I have. I think it has something to do with the configurations. Idea is to keep people like Atul and me calm on Thursdays.
Fantastic. Trust you to always have the last word, but please go on, Mr. Atul.
Well, it's pretty clear that we have the Ashirvad of Brahaspati Var, so we got something right. Look, friends, it's great to be here, and I really appreciate the minister's kindness. And I just want to say a couple things. Number one, all of the gurus say visualize, visualize, and then realize. And I feel like that has been really the story of U.S.-India relations for the past 20 or 30 years, actually. But in the topic that we have at hand, I think it's also important that we visualize, visualize, and realize. Think about the fact that just as recently as in my lifetime, when you went north of Delhi on the Grand Trunk Road, you were essentially driving through a scenery that was familiar 250 years ago. And now look at the Grand Trunk Road today. The other day I was coming in from the airport, remembering those old days landing at Palam and going on the dark roads toward Panipat, no electricity, the car barely moving, an old ambassador overloaded with luggage. And now look at what you have. The expressways that are coming up left, right, and center all around this country. I was driving onto Sardar Patel Marg, and there was the metro line, which was just being built when I was an officer here in the American Embassy 15, 18 years ago. And above it was the express line from Delhi railway station to the airport. And then, of course, the Prime Minister just inaugurated the rapid rail to Meerut the other day. I remember taking second class from Panipat to Delhi and down to Nizamuddin and off to Bangalore. See how much the country is changing. I was in Mumbai the other day with our USIBC board. Mumbai is a construction site. They are building a global financial center of the future in Mumbai. If you look at the expressways, the bridges, the airports, the metro, it is going to transform the life of Indians for years to come in Mumbai. It's happening in Bangalore. It's happening in Hyderabad. Everywhere I look out my window, I see sweeping transformation in India. So your government, your leaders are already visualizing that India of the future. They're also engaging in a sustained energy transition. I was privileged with the minister to watch the speech given by the Honorable Prime Minister in Bangalore during India Energy Week, where he talked about all of India's sweeping vision for a more sustainable transformation of their energy future. When I was a kid, one of my single memories was sitting in Panipat without internet, without TV, those things didn't exist. And the fan would go off at 8 o'clock every morning because all the power had to go to the mills. And the power wouldn't come on until 6 p.m. It got up to 45 degrees centigrade. I remember as an officer here that we dealt with blackouts and brownouts all the time, load shedding they called it. Now you don't hear those words. They're not in the lexicon of the newspapers. There is unceasing, uninterrupted power. But this is a growing nation. It's going to grow in terms of the number of people who dwell in India's great cities. It's going to grow in terms of energy consumption. And it is going to grow from being a 4 to a 7 to a 10 to a 15, 20, 30 trillion dollar economy over the course of this century. So friends, we have to visualize that bright future. The government is clearly taking steps. US IBC companies, 200 of them, American and Indian, are working hand in glove with the government and with the states to help build that bright future for the India and for the Indian people. And I would argue to you that in these very dark geostrategic times, at a moment where chaos and instability is not only growing, it is actually coalescing all around the world in dangerous places, it is all the more incumbent for the United States and India and other like-minded democracies to work to ensure the prosperity and happiness of their people. The US IBC is dedicated to that, and we see a very bright future for America and India together, but also working in concert with the democratic and free nations of the world. So as India shines, as India takes this century to grow and grow and grow, and reoccupy that place that it had from ancient times up to about 250 years ago, as generating between 1/4 and 1/3 of all of human GDP. India is going to be a great, prosperous, developed country in the first rank of democracies. What it does in its cities, what it does in terms of energy, is going to be transformative. I will leave you with a last thought. I remember my dad trying to book a call between Delhi and Panipat to tell his brother that he was going to come on the bus the next day and that we wanted to see him. And booking a call was a grand affair. You had to go down the street to beg Bimla Benji for the use of her telephone. Then you had to book the call. Then you went home after that and waited for the runner to come and say, hey, the call has come. Think about how India leapfrogged and went right into having the greatest telephony in the world, the cheapest telephony. Everyone has a smartphone. Everyone has the benefits of learning and acquiring data and information from the entire world. My hope and my prayer is that India, as it goes through its path of urbanizing and creating that India of the future, as it goes through its transition from this energy pie to a future energy consumption, that India also uses its genius and its talent to transform in ways that inspire the entire world. At the G20, our two leaders, President Biden and Prime Minister Modi, had such a great collaboration in showing how the US and India and the other great democracies can transform the lives of people all around the world. It is my hope that we fulfill all of those dreams. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those words and for the sound of hope. But when I turn to you, Minister Hardeep Puri, my question to you is, of course, there is the scent of elections in the air at any given point in our country. But at the same time, there is an unwavering situation in the world today where the strife in the Middle East, the Russia-Ukraine standoff, doing business with different countries, especially your relationship with America, balancing it with your relationship with Russia, as we've seen you doing, especially as our energy requirements are concerned. How difficult is this task that you have ahead of you? And number two, when the top honchos of the government sit together, how much do you discuss the issue of the challenges, global challenges that lie ahead of India at this moment, where swift decision making is the most important one?
Thank you very much, Navika. I just want to pick up one or two thoughts that my friend Ambassador Atul mentioned. he used the term very dark geostrategic times. It's a characterization which could be discussed. The very dark may be a slight overstatement, and yet it could be very understated. And in answering your question, I would submit for reflection that we are not only looking at the situation in the Middle East, but or for that matter, go back a year or so, Russia, Ukraine. But I do get the feeling, as someone who spent 39 years or more in the Foreign Service and then a decade thereafter on related things, 6 years as a minister, that the system that was devised in 1945, the multilateral system, anchored in the UN, the Bretton Woods institutions, etc., that system is showing serious fault lines. And it's not just one crisis it may not be able to address. I mean, witness the paralysis in the Security Council, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Atul also spoke about, he referred to urbanization, economic growth, and the movement of India from a 4-7 to a $10 trillion economy. Atul is a professional. He spent his career in the US Foreign Service. Like people, others who are professionally trained, he's trained to say nice things. But when he says those nice things, I have to provide a perspective. Yes, we will be a $4 trillion economy by December this year. We will be a $7 trillion economy a few years from now, and a $10 trillion economy by 2030. But please, and I think this should be clear because even Atul will agree with this, even our current GDP, such that it is $4 trillion or slightly short, 50% of that is in the external sector, which is the value of goods and services imported and exported, the value of remittances. So Navika ji, if things were to seriously go wrong, and I'm choosing very neutral words, I'm not casting the blame on anyone, but let's say if the world as we know it were to experience challenges of an even higher order, and I don't mean just challenges to the global energy supply and others, but overall, I mean, you would be hard put to argue and to say that countries can go on their own in a hostile environment. By hostile, I mean a negative environment. And that brings me to the second part of my context setting, if I may call it that. Navika talks about elections and the domestic political scene. And here I would like to make an even more stark point. You are today, you meaning you and me and our system domestically, is confronted with two models, two choices. One is the economic growth model, and I choose my words again very carefully, which is basically designed to take the fruits of economic development from those segments of society which have already arrived, and to take them to the most marginalized, the most vulnerable parts of society. And this became especially evident during the pandemic. Number two, all electorates, even those which are not totally mature, which don't have the kind of development challenges that we have, a model, a freebie or a rewdi model is always appealing in the short and medium term. And my submission to you is, the country is faced with a clear choice in the 9 years of the Modi government. What the Honorable Prime Minister has demonstrated, at the very least, is that good governance, by good governance I mean taking the fruits of economic development, making the economy grow, taking it into the most marginalized society, and that is reflected in the figures. You talked about connectivity in a way, in the context of metro and rapid X, you talked about it. Today, 1 crore of our citizens travel by metro rail every day. And the metro rail started well after my friend Atul was a young diplomat, and the traversing distance was here to Panipat. The Rapid X or RRTS, the first segment of it is what? To cover the 82 kilometers from Delhi to Meerut, by bringing down the commuting time from 3 hours or so to about 50 minutes. And we've just done the first segment, second one another few months, and then, but that will be one sector, Delhi Meerut. We also have on the anvil, still requiring some approvals, Delhi Alwar, Delhi Panipat. So I'm just setting the context there. If you look at our air connectivity, we had 74 airports before 2014. We've got double the number now, 148. I had my former civil aviation secretary recalling the days when we were in civil aviation. A lot of countries went through the pandemic and collapsed. We not only brought millions of Indians back home from wherever they were stranded during the economic lockdown, but our airlines have recovered. The total number of passengers we are carrying today in civil aviation is far higher than pre-pandemic time. And India, I believe, is one of the few countries in the world, if not the only one, which is ordering more than 1,000 new aircraft, Boeing, Airbus, etc. But when you face an election, there will be a lot of people who will come, some well-meaning, others designed to create derailments, will come and say, isko bhi mufat kar do, isko bhi free kar do, isko bhi free kar do. And you're left with a choice. And frankly, it's very easy when you're in the opposition to turn around and say, gas cylinder prices should be like this, petrol prices should be like this. But I find it amazing that narrative comes from a place, from a state, which is going to the polls, and I'm not introducing politics in it, where the petrol prices at the bunk are 10 rupees higher than in BJP states. I find that amazing. That you can start a false narrative. You know, I used to, who was it who said, philosophers philosophizing with a false conscience. They have no concern about what it is. You can lie through your teeth and say, no, this price should come down. I think in your state, it's 10 or 11 rupees higher than in another state, because you never reduced the VAT when the central government was reducing the excise duty. So I want to just round this off. The 9 years of the Modi government has positioned us well. You talked about urbanization. Our urban population is set to grow because urban centers are major contributors to GDP. It's already, I should be about 65% or so. My researcher is busy, he's not looking at me. 65% should be higher, 75% as we go along. McKinsey study said a few years ago that we were building 700 to 900 million square meters of urban space every year, which is the equivalent of a Chicago. But we can continue this provided the governance model at the center, again I'm stating care of politics, is one which is mature and anchored in the welfare and future of India. It's very easy for a political formation or the startup formation, you know whom I'm referring to come around and say, I was a minister a few months old in September 2017. The Delhi metro fares had not gone up for 8 years. You know, there's a prescribed fare fixation committee which is to set the fare. They had set up a fare fixation committee. It recommended an increase in 2 phases. One phase increase took place in May of 2017. Next one of Atul was supposed to take place in October. I was just a few weeks old. I got harangued, bombarded. Bilkul metro ko mufat kar do. It will be a great purifier of the come down, I was also attracted by this kind of populist slogan. But when I looked at the thing, वो 28,000 करोड़ का वो जो कर्जा लिया था, वो हमारा अंकल आके वापस करेगा. Then the argument changed. But the worst part of it is somebody comes up with this kind of a argument. My own people who should know better, say, "Sir, ये idea अच्छा है, sir. इस बार इसको मुफ्त करना." Look, it is the steely determination of our chief executive. Sorry, I'm describing the Honorable Prime Minister differently. Because he's a hands-on person who looks at the granular detail. We have been able to bring the metro system. Atul, I'm sorry to say this to you, but I know you are at least sympathetic to this. In a year and a half, 2 years' time, our metro system will be the second largest in the world, larger than the United States metro system. Why? Because the US has matured. I don't see US cities adding more metro lines. But in our cities, we went from scratch in 2022. When Vajpayee was the Prime Minister, 2002, we went from scratch. And by the time Mr. Modi assumed responsibility, it was 242 kilometers, thereabouts. Today, it is about 895 kilometers of operational metro, and they are world class. And we have got another 960 or 70 under construction. I'm just citing the metro because you spoke about urbanization. The Rapid X or the RRTS is one step further. Now, metros are within cities, Rapid X links cities. And then you've got Vande Bharat, so I don't want to go there. But two factors, two qualifiers. What happens in the world solidly impacts on India. Let's not make a mistake. Our relationship with the United States is perhaps the most important relationship that we have today. I don't want to say perhaps the most, there may be other equally important relationships. I have been on the US desk when I was Atul's age and he was here, but much later. I was Joint Secretary on the Americas desk. We've traveled a long distance, but I would like to be a little upfront, and I don't want to be misunderstood. Just as the United States is very important for India, I should like to believe India is also important for the United States, not only for the reasons that Atul mentions, democracy, shared value system, the entrepreneurial, human talent, etc. But if you look at the shape of the world as it is today, where some countries are going, I mean, these two countries have not only the gravitas just now, but the immense potential to cooperate in green energy, green hydrogen, and a host of other things. Of course, there's a little bit of asymmetry. You're a $25, $26 trillion economy. We are aspiring to be that by the time we are a Viksit Desh. But I think that journey and the strength we draw from each other, which is not to say that you will have a worldview on issues which are very different from ours, but I see the convergence increasing. Many of the things that we are saying and doing today, I would not have dreamt of when I was a civil servant on the Americas list. Thank you very much.
A very elaborate point on how India needs to stay the course as far as governance is concerned. It needs to stay the course as far as policy making is concerned. Stay the course on discipline. But in the middle of all of this, elections have to be won. Because good governance can only come if you are in government. Now, nobody who's not a member of the coalition that you mentioned without naming, nobody who's not part of the opposition coalition will disagree with the fact that the pace of development has definitely increased in the last 9.5 years. Nobody will disagree with the fact that a lot of cleanup has happened. But people will also say that there are some challenges that remain. Challenges of employment, challenges of taking development to the far-flung areas, considering the topography and the geography of India. The fact of the matter is, there is, with all of this pace of growth, pace of development, the challenge of winning elections every now and then, and as of now, we don't have a consensus on one nation, one poll. So elections keep happening, whether it's at the state level or the national elections. My question to you is, how will you and your government really stay away from the temptation of giving in to the populist promises, which is the hallmark of elections as we see it today? And with a united opposition, is the pressure higher on your government to take out, like Mary Poppins, every magic from its bag so as to win the next election?
Navika, you know, I'm a long-standing admirer of yours in particular and senior anchors who want to provoke poor ministers like me who are put on the map. I think the problem is a little more serious and not just elections. The problem is one which, if I may put it somewhat bluntly, is how your mind is wired. No matter which government you have in India, the one that Mr. Vajpayee was heading in 2002, the one that Shri Morarji Bhai Desai was heading in 1978, or what Shri Narasimha Rao, Srimati Indira Gandhi, and the one that Shri Narendra Modi ji is heading now and which we will continue to head, no matter what the time, you are faced with difficult choices. It's a question of how you want to deal with it. I'll give you one example which will sum up the approach. We are facing challenges on the energy front, and we are trying to address the issue of availability, affordability, and sustainability. And I think so far we've navigated reasonably well. Challenges of availability and affordability arose earlier also. Let me draw your attention to one single instance that the government which was in office between 2004 and 14 had to face. International prices were going up. They were desperate to keep prices at the retail outlets down. And what did they do? They floated something called oil bonds. In other words, you borrow today in order to keep prices within a range, and you pass the problem down to your grandchildren. So they borrowed what, 1,41,000 crores, and we are collectively, because of that folly, paying back 3,50,000 crores. That is what I call irresponsible behavior. And the same guys who conducted themselves like this stand up and sermonize to us. I find it the worst form of political hypocrisy. I'm not naming the person, but anyone who had so-called educated finance ministers. What else they did, I can also tell you. If you look at the non-BJP states, and I'll stop there, look at the kind of debt that they are generating. Now, either someone bails them out, or you're going to have a peculiar situation. You've got a thriving national economy, and you've got little parts just collapsing. Some not so little, some states. Now, either you have uniformly responsible behavior, fiscal and so on, I'm not going into detail, and that's why elections are all important. Therefore, I would expect that such an influential segment of our democratic society, like the distinguished fourth estate, should reach out to people and tell them this is what it is. And I think everyone who's a stakeholder in this system has to step out and say, wait a minute, you can have local issues, they can play out in your mohalla, in your urban local body, in your council elections. But when you're dealing with democracy, where do you want to take India? I mean, again, I don't want to take names. Atul was ambassador in a country very much in our sync. can go to the monetary fund for a bailout. You can have a friendly oil minister give you $4 million on credit lines, on other things. But at the end of the day, if your behavior and your mindset reflect on your spending in a particular way, no one will bail you out. In the UN, we had this category of least developed countries. Some of them done very well. Some of them have graduated to developing country status, others. But today, when Atul talks of a very dark geostrategic phase, we are looking at what? We are looking at the potential, I'm using the word, of military conflict escalating. Other actors getting drawn in. But at the same time, you also have to manage your economies. And I think those two challenges, democracies will face them well. And in the United States, clearly, ours is more robust because our developmental challenge is built in there. I am very confident that you may have a little bit of political upstarts rising, promising the moon. By the way, we're already there. So, no, issue is, if you look at two countries born from the womb of the same mother, one on our western border and here, what is the situation on energy there? What is the situation on energy here? Here, I want to say with confidence, I've been petroleum minister for about 2 years, 3 months or something. I've never come across a story where Vikram petrol plant khatam ho gaya. There may be a local pipe burst or something. Affordability, और दाम high है. When I show them, ये अतुल जी के यहाँ 40% बढ़ा दाम during that period. We brought ours down 5%. Look, at the end of the day, in a democracy, facts are empirically verifiable, and I think thanks to the Honorable Prime Minister and that absolute determined course, yes, but if some sections of our society think that you can bring in institutionalized freebie politics, we've had it.
Nobody will dispute, in theory, the point that you are making. That it is, profligacy is the death knell of every state of the country at large. Having said that, you have lost a few states where the moon was promised. And therefore, I once again ask you, what happens to the temptation when the national elections come? Because the other side, as you call them, the opposition is not in power. It can go ahead, promise the moon. You, when you're looking at the financial situation the country is in, can you do that? You've been responsible so far. Can you continue to be that? And secondly, you're expecting stakeholders. Now, stakeholders in cities, in urban India, people who are educated might just go with the disciplined manner in which they see your economic model. But there is a vast tract of voters in India that probably are not in such a good situation so as to take an economic call, because their own economic situation does not allow them to look at the national good before their own economic household balance. What will you do in that?
Every time I've interacted with you, somewhere in the, at least in the social media space, the date and the content is available. You have asked me this question repeatedly. चुनाव होने वाले हैं, आप दाम नीचे ले ला रहे हो कि नहीं? And each time I've given you the same answer. चुनाव यहाँ 5 साल का लोकसभा टेन्योर होता है और 5 साल के अंदर पता नहीं कितने चुनाव होते हैं. Those decisions are not taken by us on that basis. There is a difference between the Modi approach to development and the non-BJP states what they are practicing. Let me give you one example. During the COVID pandemic, economic activity came at one point of time to a grinding halt. What happened? People who were living in factories and who were regular employees, they stopped work, but the owners, through enlightened policies, kept them on the payrolls. Those who were contract or, hired labor went in large droves back to their states. Then people who work the agriculture sector continued some form of activity. There was one segment of our society which are called the street vendors. We brought in the Street Vendors Act in 2014. These people, in order to ply their daily trade, they borrowed money at very high rates of interest, 100% or 300%, and they would have to ply their trade and return the money. The Prime Minister saw that this segment of our society, I'll give you an example, would have nowhere to turn to. So he brought in a scheme called Swanidhi, which is a scheme for street vendors. It was rolled out in June 2020 when there was a total lockdown. It was able to disburse funds within a month. And today, I can tell you, 53 lakh street vendors have already been covered. The total amount of loans disbursed is over 9,100 crores. In a month, 15,000 crore transactions take place. That is the kind of money that is transacted. We've done analysis, and the beneficiaries of this are 68% of these beneficiaries are OBC, 43% of the beneficiaries are women, 21-22% of the beneficiaries are SC/ST. Now, this is not a traditional, we have not devised a scheme with a traditional BJP vote bank in mind, not at all. If you look at Ayushman Bharat, which is a scheme according to which 5 lakhs of Indian rupees can become available to a family for medical treatment, diagnosis, surgery, post-operation care. You look at the beneficiaries, minority communities. I went to a function in Meerut one, bulk of them were minority communities. Look, when you take development in the Modi model down, you are generating economic activity. Third, last example I'm going to give you. During the pandemic, sorry Atul, this is not intended as a side one, rich countries gave huge stimulus package. Huge. Meaning what? Trillions of dollars. That resulted in large amount of liquidity coming into the market, which in turn resulted in inflation, which in turn resulted in the need for high interest rates now to mop up that liquidity. We had a choice, and the Prime Minister chose to do it very differently. What did we do? We increased our capital expenditure budget every year by 30%. Taken it to 10 lakh crores now. What else did we do? We gave people the means for economic activity, not outright dole. Yes, we had to give outright dole also, because the pandemic was not like that Ebola, H1N1. This was like the Spanish flu of 1918. And we did all these excise cuts at a time when we gave 80 million people 3 meals of dry ration in a day. So, if you say we don't give dole out, no, we did. We had to. People would have starved. But our subsidies, when they are given, are digressive. They phase out, and economic activity phases in. Partly because of that, our economy is in good shape today.
What about your government's policy for larger investments, larger companies, and that's where America-India partnership comes in, investments in this country?
Let me tell you, I started by saying 50% of our economy, GDP is in the external sector. That brings in not only the United States, it brings in the whole business of people, other countries, their entrepreneurs wanting to come to India. If you look at the total amount of FDI which has come in overall, and the one amount that has come in 9 years, I think the total amount was what, 900 billion or something in that entire period up to 2000 or so, 2000 and something, and in the 9 years of $600 billion, I don't know, my figures are off, which shows that at the same time we are able to pursue policies and create an environment for people to want and come and invest here. I have always maintained, not only partly because I've lived in the United States, I have a lot of friends there. Look, there's no shortage of money around in the world, provided you have a good bankable project. And that's where I think platforms like this are important. I think the business, economic operator needs to be ensured. When we talk about energy, my opening line to companies, whether they're from the United States, when I talk to Secretary for Energy, Jennifer Greenholm, and anyone, my line is, if you think there is something I need to do in my E&P, let me know, we'll tweak it. But we've gone from a time, look, we were able to privatize Air India. It's a big thing. We tried twice earlier, they were not serious about it. The Modi government was serious. That has resulted in 1,000 planes order by Indigo and Air India. And actually, this 1,000 is an initial order. There's more a follow-up. Results in Boeing company in Seattle, jobs in Airbus company everywhere. So governance is a course that you have to navigate. And I can tell you, this government is equally committed, but equally committed also to the most vulnerable section. And we've been able to do that. But unless the size of the cake grows and you are able to, the economy to grow, you will not be able to spend on that. How many people go to the petrol pump every day in India? 6 crore. 60 million people. 6 crore people go. Now, there was a time nobody dreamt of the fact that we were going to be doing 20% ethanol blending by 2025. We've already reached, I think, 12% by the end of the year. We saved 41,000 crore. Look, if there is a global crisis, I think whatever the expression is in the English language, to which both you and I are new, Atul, not our mother tongue, necessity is the mother of invention. There's a crisis, you will rise to it, you will ensure that you do things which you never did before. American technology, Indian entrepreneurial spirit, and if we do that 3G plant, that's India-US. Our 2G plant, making ethanol from agricultural waste of parali, is pure domestic, Atmanirbhar. So, both countries can do this, and I want to conclude on this. The green hydrogen, which is the fuel of the future, will succeed because India and the US individually will go after that. I wish I had the kind of money that you have. How much information? Kya कहना है उसका? Inflation Reduction Act. How much did you put into it? 600 billion? No. 400 billion. I rest my case. May you do a lot of green hydrogen pursuance and may Indian companies also participate in that. But I think the India and US, the potential, the best is still to come.
Well, Atul, are you convinced with the roadmap that's been put out by Mr. Puri?
So I'm going to use an American football analogy because, you know, he and I worked each in our own governments to build the US-India strategic relationship that is so warm today. If you look at our convergence in the Indo-Pacific and the Quad, it is clear we have come so far between the United States and India. But there's a lot yet to do on the economic and commercial front. And this is where the US IBC companies are, again, putting in that hard yardage. So look at Apple. I think they're in the room. They've invested very heavily in manufacturing and export from India. Google, during our board mission last week in Delhi and Mumbai, announced that they're going to make the Pixel phone in India. Down in Tamil Nadu on the coast, Caterpillar has been building and exporting from India for more than 25 years. There's the GE Jack Welch Innovation Center in Bangalore, well worth looking at. They do amazing things there for India and for export out of India. John Deere builds something like 200,000 tractors a year here in India for the entire world. 110 countries receive those tractors from India, and on and on. I don't have to tell you about Cyberabad or Gurugram or the banks in Lower Parel. The amount of intermingling of the American and Indian economies, especially at the innovation and digital part of things, is tremendous. And we have such a first mover advantage between the United States and India working together all around the world. Go to Silicon Valley and look at the office parks of TCS and Wipro, and there's so much else. Investment in both directions is lifting the game of both of our economies. It's intensifying the skills of our people. And there is yet so much potential to be achieved. And so I keep mentioning three shlokas. One is ease of doing business. This government has done a tremendous job on that. Level playing field, very important if you're a foreign player coming in and investing. Indian companies feel that they're treated very much on par in the US, and I think our companies here have also mightily prospered. And then, of course, regulatory coherence. And this is where I think we have great relations and discussions with the government. There's a lot of collaboration because the desire is to see us hit that $500 billion mark as soon as possible. I do believe that these are very tough geostrategic times. It's very important that the great democracies get it right.
Well said. On energy security, do you have a question for the minister?
No, let me just say, I had taken something for granted. India today has the most ambitious and broad-based program for urbanization undertaken anywhere in the world. So that is the first thing.
Yeah.
And the West used to call us reluctant urbanizers. I didn't cover that for the simple reason that I think the facts, when you're building a Chicago every year, that's taken care of. Environmental, climatic and other issues also will require a separate session. Insofar as energy is concerned, I just want to leave one thought. Those who are holding the resources, there is a little bit of a dichotomy there. Some of the people who have less resources are producing more, extracting more. And those who have more are producing less. And what you have is a supply management issue which is resulting in high prices. But every time I see this phenomena, I come across one set of results. The more, if prices go up, the transition takes place faster. This is you can question this, but the last 2-3 years experience, that's what I have.
I would like to make a few points for both our veritable orators, the stage ambassador, keshap, Atul, and Mr. Hardeep Puri. I think one of the things the government should seriously look at is in the move forward on both the fronts, these critical things. The target should perhaps be made more realistic. Because we always start with a very, very over-ambitious target and sometimes we miss the bus. Other things which will contribute heavily to particularly urbanization and maybe energy security is project finance. I don't know how many of you are aware that to date for so many years since 47, not one single pure project finance transaction has taken place in our great country. Not one. Why? Because a pure project finance means parking of equitable risks at the door of all the participants to that project. That has not happened. Let me just give you one example of when there was a possibility, and that was when the generation capacity was being adequate. There again we made a mistake. The government should start with the evacuation of power before creating generation. And we did exactly the opposite. That was the previous government. And the other thing is that railways, which was a major contributor to that project finance, did not take any bit of the risk of transporting coal from the coal pit to the power station. So if the government can ensure that equitable parking and risk project finance.
Well, very, very well said thoughts, but I think there will be a session with the Railways Minister, or do I put you on the hot seat?
I follow jurisdictional coordinates and line very carefully. I would not want to be seen treading on the toes of my external affairs colleague, or if the railways did not transport coal. I don't think that fits into this session. I think we would encourage my friend of Mr. Sidhu, friend of many decades, to tell them in advance if that's what they want to discuss. That would be a very good discussion.